everyone, and welcome to another session of the Fresh Fiction Video Book Club. I'm Samantha T, and today's guest is award-winning author Aimee Carter, author of more than 20 books, or are you at 20 books?
I think I'm at 22 books now. So after a while, you kind of lose count. And do novellas count? Do international books count? It's all very confusing
I
after a
think
while. So
anything published should count. I mean, and even books that you've written that haven't been published yet. I mean, there's a lot of effort that still goes into that.
if you want to count unpublished books, then we're probably close to 60 at this point. So it's not good.
Well, Aimee, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey getting to writing in all of those 60 books.
Um, oh my gosh. So I started out as a very reluctant reader, actually. When I was a kid, I did not want to read. My dad actually had to bribe me to read. I mean, literally, I would get like $5 a book. And I would go to Toys R Us, and spend that money and save up. And I mean, it was very fiscally responsible of me. I'd read 4 or 5 books, and they were little books. I mean, I was 6 or 7 years old at that point, and save up, and that was. But after a while, he realized he didn't need to encourage me to read anymore because I was going to the library regularly. I was burning my way through the Babysitters Club and, Sweet Valley Twins and all of these books series that, I was a 90s child. So, that gives you an idea of the series I was reading, the Thoroughbred series. I loved that series. And yeah, when the time came for me to, creative writing kind of started in middle school for me. I wanted to write about the characters that I'd been reading about. And at that point, Harry Potter had just come out. And I was 11 when Harry was 11. So for the first 4 books, I was actually the age of the main character for that series. And of course, there were the long waits between the books. So the way I started writing was through fan fiction. And I created these worlds or these stories around the world and the characters that already existed. And after a couple of years and posting those online and getting some very harsh feedback regarding what I was doing right and definitely what I was doing wrong, I started to create my own characters and my own worlds. And by the time I graduated from high school, I think I had a dozen or more, maybe 2 dozen novels under my belt. I had I'd gotten an agent at one point when I was 18, but that didn't work out. So it was a few more years before my first book was, we were starting down the pipeline with that. So
And what was that particular journey going from writing your novels and having, especially the feedback and kind of learning what was working and what wasn't, to then actually getting that first book published?
it was, I mean, it was, getting thrown into the fire. The internet was the wild, wild west back then. It still kind of is, in a lot of ways. But I wouldn't be the writer today that I am today if it wasn't for the environment that I put my work out in. I posted it online on, I think it was fanfiction.net at the time. I don't know if it still exists. But it was great because the readers who read it could be anonymous and they could comment. And I quickly learned the difference between constructive criticism and someone just complaining about something that they didn't like a pairing or, maybe someone who just had a bad day. And it was actually really good for me as far as learning how to write really quickly. Um, a lot of people, when they get that kind of criticism, they will step back immediately and maybe not try again. But I don't know if I was just feeling stubborn or resilient or whatever it was that day or that year. But I was very much okay, I can do better. I'm gonna prove you wrong. And that really kind of fueled my fire. But I just loved writing. I loved creating characters. I loved creating scenarios. I loved putting these puzzles together in a way and surprising the reader, and coming up with new ways to envision these scenarios that were really interesting to me. And yeah.
Well, what aspect of that comes to you first? Is it the scenario? Is it the initial idea? Is it the characters? Are you seeing that in your head? Are they talking to you?
It's almost always the big picture. So for Royal Blood, um, I always knew it was going to be about the illegitimate daughter of the King of England. What form that took was not necessarily immediately clear to me. I've actually been trying to write Royal Blood since about 2012. And it took various forms, but the funny thing is, it never really strayed from what it ended up being. The illegitimate daughter of the King of England, who's American and who gets kicked out of boarding school, has a mentally ill mother and has to go stay with her royal family for X amount of time. There was another boarding school for royals involved at one point, but there was always like a murder mystery around it. There was always these different aspects that stuck, and for me, it was just rearranging them until it felt like a cohesive story that I really wanted to tell. But if I wrote the first chapter of this book, years and years and years ago. And if you look at the very first draft and what ended up being published, there's really not a whole lot of difference.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, for me, it's always the concept. It's always the big idea, or the log line, as a lot of people call it in writing, the premise. So,
Well, and I know this is a trilogy.
mhm,
So having that big picture, and especially when we're talking about mysteries, this is
mhm.
an area I'm always curious about. I mean, do you have that? Do you have all the at least the big picture ins and outs of where it's going? Or are you still surprised yourself as you're going through the book and it's like, oh, well, that took a different turn than I had initially expected?
A little bit of both. So I'm a heavy outliner. I always know you're about to meet my very snuffly cat. I'm so sorry. Come here. This is probably for the best, so she doesn't jump up. So sh the I'm a very heavy outliner, so I always like to plan what's going to happen ahead of time. And I'm so sorry for that noise. I don't know if you can hear it.
Don't worry, my cat's over here in the background too, so it's fine.
She's very clingy. She's very sweet, but she's very clingy. So I always outline. I always know exactly what's going to happen. I always plan things out. I usually do index cards, especially for plot lines that have a lot of components in it, like mysteries. And these can end up being well over 100 index cards of just different scenes, different plot points, different aha moments. But and I always have a pretty pristine outline when I start writing, but as I go along, one of the most one of the best parts of writing for me is finding those little aha moments as I'm writing that suddenly everything changes a little bit. Maybe not the entire structure of the story, but maybe the person that I thought was doing one thing is actually doing another. And um, the without giving anything away, for instance, the role that Maisie plays in the first book, Princess Maisie, was not in the outline at all, in the murder mystery, and that sort of turned everything on its head, halfway through the book, and that was a lot of fun to play with. And so it still stays interesting for me as I'm writing it, even though I think I know everything going into it.
Well, and this book is YA focused,
Mhm.
murder mystery, different from a lot of your previous books. I mean, you had the Goddess Test series, which was also YA, but a lot of your books are middle grade books,
Yeah.
which is we don't talk to a lot of authors that have the middle grade. So what are really the differences that you found in writing those middle grade series and books, and especially as you moved into more of the YA books?
For me, middle grade was kind of a fluke. And I know this sounds silly, but I always envisioned myself as a young adult author and then maybe getting into adult later on. But I had this idea in my head about a boy who could change into animals, and that fit so well in the realm of middle grade that I had to write it. And it did okay in the US, but it really hit internationally. And they kept asking for more and more and more books. So I mean, now I have more middle grade books than I do YA, which is very strange to me. But the difference for me is the voice, first of all, how the characters think, how they act. Of course, there's a huge difference between a 12-year-old boy and an 18-year-old girl and how they think, of course, and how they're going to react to situations, the resources they have available to them. The 12-year-old is usually going to need to be chaperoned in some aspect, or at least have adult supervision. They're going to have a safety net of some kind. In general, not always. There's definitely been situations in books that I've written where they don't have a safety net. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest differences to me between middle grade and YA. Middle grade, there's usually an adult in the wings that they can go to if they really, really need to in order to get help. In YA, that safety net is usually taken away in some aspects. So,
I think it's always so interesting too, because I remember back when it's the different um I guess grade focus types of books were very segmented, right? I mean, it was a clear thing of you've moved past the middle grade books and now you're reading YA or teen books, and then you graduate to the full blown adult books.
mhm.
Now I find those lines are so blurred in many cases. I know I read a lot of YA books, again, because of the fantasy elements. I mean, I mean, if it's a really good story, I mean, it's going to pull you in. And I think that's where a lot of readers are. And even going back again to the Harry Potter books that we were talking about earlier, right? I mean, those were essentially middle grade books when they were first coming out. And how many people have read those? I mean, do you find that you also are seeing crossovers with different fans or readers who might have read your middle grade books, then check out your YAs? Do you get different types of feedback?
So the only thing that makes me a little nervous is the middle grade readers who want to look at my YA because, you know, there's a bit of an age gap there. They're categorized that way for a reason. But honestly, I think that kind of blurring of the lines is testament to all of the amazing kidlit that's out there these days. Middle grade YA, adults who read both, who read everything. Not that, 40 years ago the stories weren't amazing. They were, but it's destigmatized in a way because all of these really popular franchises tend to be middle grade or young adult. And so when you go to see The Hunger Games in the theater or Percy Jackson on Disney Plus, and you have all these incredible stories available in other media to a wider audience, I think it makes it a little bit less secretive. I think if you're going to read them in your downtime, you don't have to be so speaking of Harry Potter, I know there's a lot of stigma attached to that series, and I'm speaking of the book series as it is, regardless of everything else. um, I remember when they came out with adult covers in the UK because there was such a stigma attached to the children's covers with the cartoons. And I don't believe they do that anymore. I can't think of another series they've done that with. Um, and I see adults, even in just real life, reading Percy Jackson, reading all of these middle grade books, just in day to day. I go to the library in the middle grade section, and there are adults browsing the shelves. I mean, it's this amazing kind of cross section of literature is for everybody. Yes, it's categorized by age group for children, maybe because you don't necessarily want an 8-year-old reading
But
something
my
that's
question is,
Oops, we're gonna have them muted. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Amy.
well, you're fine. You don't necessarily want an 8-year-old reading something that's appropriate for an 18-year-old or a 28-year-old. But those who can read anything they want, are reading anything they want. And I think that's incredible. I think that's really led to the boom that middle grade and YA especially are seeing right now.
Mhm. The other thing I think is really interesting with your two YA series is that you're taking well-known elements, like with the goddess test books, where it's mythology, and putting different spins on that. And now, of course, with Royal Blood, the firm, and but none of these are what people might have read or are familiar with. So how do you balance that here are those details that people are looking for, of the different hierarchy elements, or the all those royal type nuances with the firm, but still put your own twist on it so that it's your story and your characters.
Well, with the goddess test, I love Greek mythology, and I of course stuck to the basics of the the 12 Olympians and everything else going on there. But I very much put my own twist on it because who wants to rehash the old myths as they are, right? We're here for something new. But with royal blood, one of my favorite things is that if you look at the details of what Evan and Maisie and Alexander, who's the king, go through, to the best of my ability and my knowledge, that is accurate to what the actual royal family goes through. Like I could probably break into Windsor Castle at this point because I've looked at so many maps and so many walkthroughs, and the I've read so many books on protocol and so many insider. I know one of the ladies was talking about Lady Colin Campbell. I've read a couple of her books. I've read the Tom Bower ones. I've read just different royal watchers from our different royal reporters, the royal rota from different sides. Like some are pro Harry and Meghan, some are pro William and Kate, some are pro Diana, some are pro Charles, some are pro. It's this wild tangle of a family fight that's been going on for decades. It's amazing. I'm Switzerland in this. I'm here for the drama, you know. But in those books, you get little details that maybe not everybody's paying attention to. But um, for instance, in the this is such a minor detail, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. You learn that Jenkins, who is Alexander's private secretary, has a particular Royal Victorian Order, and that is accurate to what active private secretaries have um, in the firm. And but if you're retired, you have another one. You're kind of upgraded to like a grand order. I forget exactly what it's called, but just little details like that. So that was my like foundation. And then I kind of let everything go crazy a little bit. We added the drama. We added things that I would want to read about, things that made it interesting for me. And not all of it's over the top. As far as I know, not, assassinations attempt have happened. There were two of them, I think, against Charles in Australia in the 90s. And just all of these things that seem so far-fetched in fiction maybe have actually happened to this royal family and maybe aren't talked about as much. But it was really fun taking these aspects of drama and inserting it into this foundation that on the surface looks really boring to a lot of people. You know, they go through these functions, they go through this very tradition heavy life that is very neat and square, and but at the same time there's so much going on under the surface that's just absolutely fascinating to me, and how the media perceives them. And you stick an 18-year-old American girl who doesn't know, what fork to use at dinner into that, and chaos definitely ensues. And it was just so much fun to write. I loved every aspect of that. Sorry, I hope that was a lot of rambling. I hope that answered
Oh
your
no,
question.
no, it was great. No, no, really gave us some additional insight into it. That's what I was looking for. But with that, I do want to switch over to what we call our fresh fiction facts. These
Okay.
are a set of random fire type questions off the top of your head.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll even go a really easy one for you. Did you watch The Crown?
Yes.
Yes. Favorite aspect of it?
The Diana years and perspective there,
Okay.
the different warring perspectives.
Again, like you said, you're Switzerland, so I won't press beyond that. Who would you most want to be stuck in an elevator with?
I am horrifically claustrophobic, so I would not want to be stuck in an elevator at all. Period. That's a no go.
That is a fair question. Fair answer with it. Yep. Okay. What is your favorite writing fuel? What keeps you going?
Tea, Earl Grey, decaffeinated, like a London fog with half milk. Very particular on that.
I'm sure there'll probably be some additional questions on that in the after hour. We have a lot of various tea connoisseurs in our group for sure.
I can't have caffeine. Let's leave it at that.
Other than books, what is something that you own a ridiculous amount of?
Animals.
Oh my goodness, how many animals do you have?
I have seven.
Wow.
Right
All
now
dogs
I have
and cats or
five. Okay, so only six of them are mine. I have five cats and a dog, but I'm also fostering another dog right now. So it's not that many in the scheme of things, but as far as like an actual, when you look at it, it's a lot. It's too many. It's too many.
is there truly such a thing as too many pets?
Yes,
Okay.
I think so. When you're the only one responsible for them, yeah.
Okay. What do you do to celebrate a release?
I usually go to a bookstore and sign stock, but after 22 of them, that's pretty much it. I buy myself a little piece of cake, maybe.
What is the most terrible movie that you legitimately enjoy and will rewatch?
Spice World.
Oh my gosh.
I love Spice World. Spice World is one of my favorite movies. It's awful. There's no structure to it. It makes no sense. It's just these five girls, five British girls running around, having a ball with terrible FX and everything else, and made in like 1998 or 1997. I love it. I love it.
Now, do you sing along with them? Also,
No one wants to hear me sing.
what is the craziest thing that you've bought online or from TV?
I'm gonna have to pass on that. I can't think of anything.
Okay, how about what luxury item can you not live without?
Wait, I'm blanking. This is terrible. Oh, my iPad. But it's not the iPad specifically, it's the Magic Keyboard that comes with it. Because I can basically take a computer with me anywhere. It's almost like a free write, if you're familiar with those. Um, but it's an iPad, so I can kind of detach from the internet and everything and just write. And it's an iPad, but it folds. It's great. I love it. It lets me write anywhere. So
What is something that will immediately take you out of a story? If you're reading a book or watching a movie, what is that thing that just ruins the mood?
a pop culture reference, like a really obvious one that is very particular that is referenced in a very particular time period. So, like a Taylor Swift quote, or s- something that happened 5 years ago that's referenced in a book that kind of takes away the timelessness of it, unless it's a period piece, unless it's very specifically takes place in X year. Yeah, that immediately breaks the magic for me.
Okay. Um, okay, you've been kidnapped, but 2 hours later, they let you go because you can't stop talking about what?
My dog. Do you want to see her? She's really
Of
cute.
course, we always like the pets to visit. Oh my gosh,
This is Pippa.
adorable.
She was sleeping, so she's a little confused right now, but
Oh, so now she's like, okay, why are you bothering me, mom?
yes.
Right? Oh, see, my cat will never make an appearance. He just meows at me and digs the claws in during these interviews, and I try to casually and gracefully ignore him during the time. But oh well.
Honestly, we're lucky it's only been one, so
What road trip snack do you always grab from the gas station?
gummy bears, especially if they have the pineapple ones. Haribo or Hasbro only makes, and now we have the barking. I apologize. Oops. They make pineapple only bags, and those are my absolute favorites.
I don't think I've seen the pineapple only ones.
Five
Awesome.
Below.
Would you rather go back in time and meet your ancestors or go forward and meet your descendants?
I probably won't have any descendants. But honestly, my ancestors were probably pretty boring, so let's go forward in time. And I'd rather honestly not die of like cholera. So forward in time. Forward in time is a good one.
And I can support the I don't want to die by cholera. That's, yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
This is
no, it's
my
fine.
life.
Don't worry. I completely, we all understand that. Don't worry. What is one thing that was ruined once it
I'm,
became popular?
I'm sorry.
What is one thing that became ruined once it became popular?
I'm an Aquarius. As soon as something becomes popular, I'm not into it anymore.
Done. That's it.
That's it. Yep. Oh.
Um, who do you think should be on the Mount Rushmore of authors? And this could be your favorites or the most influential. Yeah, this one's a hard one.
This is really tough. Um, why am I blanking? This is terrible. Maya Angelou, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question. She's incredible. Yeah. Harper Lee. One book, but one book that has just changed the world. I mean, um, uh, Lois Lowry. God, she's one of my very, very favorites. The Giver changed my life. It changed my perspective on writing. Um, I, I should probably name a guy. I don't need to name a guy.
You don't need to name a guy.
Name
No.
a guy.
When you
Enough
start off with
attention.
Maya Angelou, I mean, you really don't need to name a guy, okay?
Fine. They already have Mount Rushmore. They don't need this one. Um, I will say Neil Gaiman though. So he's just, I don't know, the voice, he brought a certain voice to everyone. Now, okay, yeah, okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. But Neil Gaiman gets a pass.
That's a good batch.
Okay.
We can go with that. What is your most dog-eared or reread book? The one that you
The
just keep
Giver.
going back to.
The Giver, definitely.
Okay. That was just on TV the other day. I was catching the various bits as I was roaming through the house.
Really.
Oh yeah.
I the movie didn't do it for me. I think it's just the wonder that you don't and just the perspective that is slowly opening up that you don't necessarily get in the movie. Um, and how your own biases creep into it at first. Like you assume there's color, but then you realize, wait a second, there isn't color. Okay, what else am I assuming that doesn't exist? I in the movie you don't get that, right? So
Again, the differences between books and movies,
yeah,
right?
good
And so
writer.
often we as readers, it's, I mean, almost always the book is better, right? Because exactly those things you're saying, that you start to have these realizations and, oh, what else am I assuming? And, oh, well, this is different than I pictured. And
Yeah. I love movies. I actually have a degree in screenwriting. But it is kind of amazing how often the book is better. Now, not all the time. Not
not all
all
the
the
time.
time.
Yes.
But yeah, there is something to be said for the art of having more words to work with and the reader's imagination to play with as well.
Mhm.
So you don't get that in movies.
Well, what should our readers and listeners expect from you next? What are you currently working on?
I'm working on the third Royal Blood book, Royal Vengeance, and that will be out next summer. A little bit of a delay because my family has been in kind of a massive health crisis for the past 10 months. So definitely doing that. And then I have some more international books that haven't been announced yet. And after that, I'm hoping to dive back into another middle grade series. That would be amazing.
Oh, awesome. Now, for your international books, do those get printed mostly in Europe and also English copies here in the States, or are they kind of exclusive or on completely different timelines?
They are pretty much exclusively published in Europe at this point. Germany, a couple of other countries as well. I'm not even sure I can name them at this point. But it's right now Germany has contracted me to write them. So that's who I write them for. I would love them to be published in English one day. So it's basically a continuation of the Simon Thorne series, which you can kind of see. Oh, random royal scandal, but these guys right here. Um, and I would love for it to be out in English, and we're working on it. We're working really, really hard on it. So one day. Oh, here's cat number two.
Oh. When you're writing the book that you know is primarily going to be for the German audiences, do you find that it's a different slant to it
Um,
versus the English or US audiences?
you know, I originally wrote the first three for American audiences, and those are the ones that hit in Germany. So I figure why fix something that isn't broken? So I write the books I want to write. I always write the books I want to write. And I write the books I want to read too. That's important to me. If I wouldn't want to read them, I wouldn't expect anyone else to want to read them as well. Um, so no, I don't really take into consideration the audience as far as like foreign country, except for maybe locations in the book or names or things like that, little things like that. But I don't really change the slant of the book at all or the plot. Sorry, he's very affectionate.
Oh, yeah, you're getting all the love in there. Yes. Well, where is the best place for our readers and listeners to keep up with you, find out what's going on, and any other kind of news?
That is a great question. I'm not on social media that much anymore. But if I am, it's usually on Instagram and it's usually posted to my stories. I'm not a big grid poster, but my stories on Instagram, if there's an update, it's usually there. So
And what's your handle on Instagram then?
Aimeemoc. I'll type it in the chat if that's okay.
Awesome. Well, Aimee, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been a blast talking with you, but stick around for the happy hour with our readers where they get to ask you some additional questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me.